Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We're here again to read from the Bhagavatam. Thank you all for joining us. Hope you're well. Hope your new year is going off to a good start, as they say.
Hope you're keeping up with your New Year's resolutions.
2 days in.
Well, that's when they normally
fall apart?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, where are we?
Canto 3, Chapter 31, Text 36.
Okay.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. At the sight of his own daughter, Brahma was bewildered by her charms and shamelessly ran up to her in the form of a stag when she took the form of a hind. Hind. What's a hind? Female deer? You looking it up? Female deer? So we need the viewers that too.
Yeah, a female deer.
Female deer. So the daughter was in the...
Yeah, it's hind, not hind. It's hind.
Hind. So the daughter was in the form of a female deer and Brahma was in the form of a stag. Purport. Lord Brahma's being captivated by the charms of his daughter and Lord Shiva's being captivated by the Mohini form of the Lord are specific instances which instruct us that even great demigods like Brahma and Lord Shiva, what to speak of the ordinary conditioned soul, are captivated by the beauty of a woman. Therefore, everyone is advised that one should not freely mix even with one's daughter or with one's mother or with one's sister. Because the senses are so strong that when one becomes infatuated, the senses do not consider the relationship of daughter, mother or sister. It is best, therefore, to practice controlling the senses by performing bhakti yoga. Anyway, I've got something to say. Hang on, but I'll continue reading. Engaging in the service of Madan Mohan. Lord Krishna's name is Madan Mohan, for he can subdue the god Cupid or lust. Only by engaging in the service of Madan Mohan can one curb the dictates of Madan, Cupid. Otherwise, attempts to control the senses will fail. So it's quite interesting because just before we sat down to read, I was just information gathering on the internet, and and then there's this nun who joined the nunnery when she was 19. She's now 50. That's a long time.
31 years. No.
And 24.
Yeah, 31 years.
Well, okay, she's 50 now, but she was 19 when she joined, but she left 7 years ago. She left 7 years ago, the nunnery. Now, it's interesting because I read it, so I was fascinated by what I was reading. And then we read this about the senses, engaging in bhakti yoga, because she was a nun and not in any way criticizing, because she was part of a very strict order where you only spoke for 2.5 hours a day, and the rest of the time they had to be in studying the scripture Bible and contemplation. So super strict, and you covered your head, you covered your whole body. But this convent, they had monks visiting occasionally, and they would give talks where lots of people there. And it just so happened that a visiting monk was there, and so she was brought into that same room. And bearing in mind she's led a very strict, especially Western one, I don't mean a degrading way, but from the age of 19, very strict. And the senior nun, as it were, said, come here because he's a visitor. Let's see what he wants to eat or drink, just to be polite. But then that senior nun or whatever had to just leave the room for a second. Really interesting. So they were left alone in the room, which I'm very surprised. And then there was no talking between them, because it wasn't like they were like weird, you know, in that way. But as Prabhupada explains here, even your own sister, your mother, whatever, you know, and as Prabhupada does say in other places, that the woman is like the fire and the man is
like
the
butter.
Yeah, I say margarine these days, but it is butter, I guess. So the point is that they were left. So okay, nothing happened. But then because that lady, the senior nun, whatever, you know, he got up to go, because why do you need to be in a room alone with a woman? So he got up to go, and as he was walking out the door, you know, like the nuns, they have the long robes and that, so you know, she must have opened the door, just moved out the way, and just the robe, you know, like it's long sleeved as it were, hanging, touched his cloth. And because he'd been so strictly
adhering to the principles of
but
order.
And I don't mean this in a criticizing way, but you could say, you know, in a natural way for them, like Bhakti Yoga is so engaging. You know, you can be a householder, you can be a pop star, films, you know, the whole process doesn't mean I need to go and live in a cave, I'm saying. But that touch, and they interviewed in the news, gave them an electric shock. Like they felt excited. And in any other situation, let's say the milkman comes to the door, or you go and, you know, it's like, yeah, well, there you go, mate, yeah, or might touching and whatever. But because you're in that situation, you know, it and a week later, because it disturbed the mind, you know, it's like Ajamil in the Bhagavatam, if you know the pastime, and it was like, oh, what was that? Oh, you know, it's really interesting in relation to what we're reading. So a week later, that monk sent a note to the nun. Didn't know what, and they said didn't even know what color her hair was, because you know they have that headpiece as well, they're covered. Didn't know her name, but just said, because they're feeling that sense of what's going on here. They couldn't understand it. You know, it's feelings of lust and feelings of attraction. So he said, will you marry me? And then they left their respective convents, and 7 years later, they're still together. They're married. And he's a vicar in a local church, if you want to know the conclusion, and she's a chaplain in a local hospital. But sadly, when they disclose these feelings and that, they weren't treated so nicely by their respective monasteries. You know, like the senior nun said, you met this man once, and now a week later you want to go, that you're crazy, which is kind of understandable as well. But and so they were kind of shunned, and what I found was interesting was they were taught you can only love God. This is how they taught, and you know, you only talk for 2.5 hours to other people over meals or whatever. So then she's like, can I love God and have someone else in my life? There's in which Prabhupada is so amazing, the process is given. You can be married, you know, and have kids if you want, and cat and dog, well, maybe not cat, but you know what I mean, like you can, Bhakti Yoga is all encompassing. But it really played with their minds. I just thought it was fascinating. What do you think?
I think you think it's fascinating.
I did, and when I was reading this,
it's definitely relevant to the topic matter. You know, it's like how just a simple, you know, after being, celibate practitioner of a spiritual religious order for 24 years, then just, you know, you rub up against someone once, not even touch them physically, but there are things in some little spark, and it's like all of a sudden it all gets set off. Reminds me of a story, I forget who told it, one senior devotee, I don't think definitely wasn't Prabhupada, but about some, I think quite well-known Western yogi type person who went to the Himalayas and had renounced the world and was up there for many, many years, I don't know, 7, 10, 12, 15, something, quite a number of years, and was performing, you know, intense meditation every day. And then one day some Westerners came up and we're there, and someone had on the radio this song, Brown Eyed Girl. You're my brown-eyed girl. And they started playing that song. He heard it. All memories came flashing back in from his youth and young age, and he just got up immediately and walked out and left. Went back to like normal society.
Wow.
And of course, Sobari Muni was underwater. I forget, meditating 10,000 years, something like that. And that he just saw two fish kind of do the do, and he thought, okay, I need to get married. So, it's very fickle situation.
Yes.
That renounced state in the sense of complete abstention from the objects of the senses can be, it is very difficult to control. That's why Srila Prabhupada said the reason people worship me is because I have conquered sex desire. And, so people are like, all hail, it's like, that's why a sannyasi is held in such a high regard, because they've kind of gone beyond that. Whereas you were just talking yesterday that you wanted to mention on this about this guy who's 92 and he has a 2-year-old child.
Bernie Eccleston. He's the owner of F1, Formula 1. You must know him.
You must know him, of course. I had no idea who he is. But yeah.
92.
And he has a 2-year-old child.
I mean, he has other grown-up kids, and his latest wife is younger than his grown-up kids, as that's the way it normally is.
Of course.
But his latest child is 2, and he's 92.
Yeah. So, again, Prabhupada did, I'm pretty sure, tell this story. I think this is what's it called? Akbar and Bilbo or something like that. That Akbar was the king, I think, and Bilbo is the, if you know that, you can put it in the, he was the minister. And so they would have a lot of conversations. And so he was mentioning to him, when you get old, then this desire diminishes and goes away. And he said, come with me and bring your daughter. So the king brings the princess, and they go to visit this old man in hospital, on the verge of death, this old man. And he's laying in a hospital bed. And they walk in, and the old man looks at the king and quickly looks to the daughter, and becomes very animated. Very beautiful, and like, and then they could all see, and he said to the king, just see, this man is very old, 80s, 90s, on the verge of death, but still, he looked right past his king, straight to the beautiful lady, and became, so, these things are facts of life, I guess, and, but how to deal with it. Even Lord Brahma, it says here, became attracted by his own daughter. So that's a
controversial,
famous pastime from 3rd canto, I think. Yeah, beginning of the 3rd canto. Pretty sure it's 3rd. It might be in the 2nd, but I think it's 3rd. Should we read 37?
Yes.
Okay. Text 37. Amongst all kinds of living entities begotten by Brahma, namely men, demigods, and animals, none but the sage Narayan is immune to the attraction of Maya in the form of woman. So this must be Narayan, the sage Narayan. The first living creature is Brahma himself, and from him were created sages like Marichi, who in their turn created Kasyapa Muni and others. And Kasyapa Muni and the Manus created different demigods and human beings, etc. But there is none among them who is not attracted by the spell of Maya in the form of woman. Throughout the entire material world, beginning from Brahma down to the small insignificant creatures like the ant, everyone is attracted by sex life. That is the basic principle of this material world. Lord Brahma's being attracted by his daughter is the vivid example that no one is exempt from sexual attraction to woman. Of course, for a woman, that attraction generally is for the man. In the modern day, attractions go in all different directions. Therefore, woman is the wonderful creation of Maya to keep the conditioned soul in shackles. There you go. Women are Maya. We're back to that conversation from yesterday. So that's an interesting. So women. Now, one thing that I always find interesting, I probably mentioned it before, is that in pretty much every other species of life, the most beautiful or ornate or decorative gender of that species is usually the man, is usually the male. So amongst birds, the prettiest bird is usually the male species. So like even amongst chickens, the rooster is the most, flamboyant. The peacock, not over the peahen, is I think a very vivid and good example. And I can't remember others, but most all of them are like that. Even I think amongst fish, it usually kind of works out like that. So it's interesting that amongst humans, it is the female who is the more attractive. So, but that principle, it's there, that it's the binding force of the material energy. It just binds us, locks us in because of that attraction. And it's Prabhupada said that once you give up gross sex life, there's subtle sex life, which is even, it's the more difficult to overcome, which means, it means fame, adoration, and distinction. He gives that these are the subtle forms of sex life: fame, adoration, and distinction. Pran, pratishta, and I guess moha. Fame, adoration, and distinction. So and men and women don't have to be engaging grossly in the activity, but there's that exchange. I guess in Western culture or any culture, they call it like flirting is there. So you get some little shots.
Rasa.
Yeah, some rasa, some taste is there just from being in that association, which is why Prabhupada said earlier, you have to be very careful in that association. You spend too much time in that association, you're playing with that energy, and you're getting some taste, and therefore you'll want to get that elsewhere.
It's interesting, that mood of, like Prabhupada is explaining, to not be, to be careful even with your daughter, mother, sister. It sounds a bit extreme. But I remember many moons ago when we were in hospital once visiting a relative, and then there was like a bench, like everyone's taking up as many seats as they could around the bed, and then there was like a bench, and so my auntie said, I was standing out, there's only older adults, and then I sat down, and then another uncle was there, and then they said, like, I think someone said, because everyone's trying to get everyone to sit down around the bed, and then he hesitated to sit next to me, and I remember I must have been in later secondary school type thing, but I thought, I feel weird, like, not I felt weird that he would sit with me, but I thought, why is he being weird that he can't sit with me? And then one particular aunt said, it's okay, you can sit with her. And when I read this many years ago, because Prabhupada says this in other places as well about the being alone with your sister, mother, all that, it kind of made me think of that remnants of that culture is there in Indian culture, and that because he was hesitating to sit, because it's not like a big, like a bench, it's not a big bench, we wouldn't have been touching and squashed for sure, but he
We're
was
so close,
hesitating
yeah.
to sit with me in front of every, we were sitting on someone who was basically like dying on the bed, like, geez.
Generally, I guess,
But-
like you mentioned, even in Indian culture, more coming from India, even like hugging and
Oh, yeah.
kissing.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, like I grew up, and
yeah.
my family is like every night before going to bed, you have to hug and kiss your parents, and if there's other relatives around, you hug and kiss them. It's like before you leave the program, you hug and kiss everybody. It's all hugging and kissing, and it seems harmless, but you know, it has its effect. But in you know, Indian culture, maybe not all Asian culture, but in Indian culture, generally that's just not done, right?
I definitely know kissing, meaning of your, whatever, social kissing, let alone hugging. Very rare. And I'm not, obviously now things are different, blah, 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 different families. But yeah, very rare, very not done. One of my uncles very quickly who went to America, like when my parents came to this country and then he went to America. So we always saw him as Americanized. So when he came to the UK the first time, I don't know, so many years. Yeah, he walked through the door and he was picked up from the airport, came home, and he hugged my mum, and I could see it. She was like stiff and horrified, and she knew him from India. They all grew up together. He's my dad's cousin, and then he came and hugged me, and I was also like, whoa, I just thought this is too much. What's going on here?
In my culture, if someone came in and they didn't hug you, you'd think they were weird because
yeah.
And I know in France and other European countries, everyone when they greet each other, they're like, hello.
Yeah.
Things similar in Italy, at least one or two kisses. If you know them very well, then it's three. It's like
yeah.
So different cultures, but in general, the idea being conveyed here is that better to keep the distance and keep prevention is better than cure. Like that. Well, the next purport is quite long, and we've gone over a little bit. Been very talkative. Bhava Bhakti's got her wits about her.
Someone just
So we're going to go.
rang the bell.
See you later. Hare Krishna. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.
Jai.